So hey there fellow YouTubers, Frank Bush here again. So this weekend I plan on doing something a little bit different. I'm going to do an urban survival challenge, or a homeless challenge if you will, some people call it. But yeah, doing urban survival settings, you know, more of try to utilize the resources within a city environment. I am going to have a couple items with me. I'm going to be fairly thin on it though. I'll have a toque, I'll have some gloves, I'll have a small little dollar store backpack I picked up. Little paracord bracelet I managed to grab from the dollar store. I've got some solid fuel tabs I got from the same dollar store. Just in case I have a hard time with fuel, I just wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to cook off food and boil water one way or the other. I'll try not to rely on this resource. I'll try to harvest just off of the urban environment, but that's really there as a safety more than anything. And then I've got the normal little kit that I would carry on my hip, you know, on my belts at all times. This is a little fire kit slash pocket knife. So I've got a little Swiss Army knife in here, a ferro rod. I believe there's a Mylar emergency blanket in there, a little 4 foot by 6 foot one or whatever, you know, the little ones you get at the dollar store. But it's got a magnifying glass in there as well. I doubt I'll be using that today. It's been raining, so I don't think I'll see too much sun. I mean, we'll see how the day goes. But yeah, this is the heart of the kit that I'm going to be bringing with me. Hopefully harvest containers and cover and those types of things when I'm out in the field. But it's about 8 o'clock in the morning where I'm at. I plan on leaving momentarily, and I'm aiming to be home tomorrow midday-ish. So hopefully we'll get a video together. I'll bring the GoPro with me to kind of get some good footage of things and see if I can get anything interesting worth watching. But there's my basic kit, and well, I'll flip over to the next scene. You'll see me out in the field. Just out in the world now. I figured I'd kind of leave when I left the house, swing up into this location, this area. Generally speaking, there's a large park over here, baseball diamond, kids park, and that kind of stuff. And there's tennis courts on the other side, in behind me here, and public bathroom access over in this area. So I'm going to kind of scour about this area, see if I can find anything of any use. Primarily, I'm looking for containers. The potentially steel containers would be preferable, but some sort of waterproof container. I'm looking for some cordage. I'm looking for some tarps, some cover of some kind. Any type of sharp objects, metal objects are always good to find. So I'm going to just kind of do a peruse through this area. Hopefully even find a bit of food, maybe off some of the trees in the environment. So that'll be the mission at this point in time, is really just gathering resources. One of the main things I think I need at this point in time is to find myself some sort of steel coffee pot or something along that lines. That would be an ideal thing. Make myself a billy can for later on. But so that's my plan, is I'm just going to kind of, as you can see, this is what I have. There's no tricks up my sleeve. There's a little bag I was talking about earlier. There's definitely no tricks up my sleeve, just my wool jacket, that kind of stuff. So as we go, we'll just kind of take different snapshots of how we progress through the day. So one of the first resources I kind of stumbled upon was, I got these doggy bags for in the park, I guess, help people pick up their dog poo or whatever. But the city gives out bags, and there seems to be a half decent set of them in there, so I'm going to take a handful of those for later use. If they're giving them away for free, I'll take them. As you can see, must be 10-20 bags there, but either way, good acquisition. So you always want to kind of keep your eye out and be keen-eyed for any type of resources you can find. You're really in gather mode at this point in time. Oh, there's a good one over there. Here, let's see here. Oh, steel cup. Perfect. Don't know why the hell this is here, but it's here. A little bit of rust on it, not too bad. Either way, it gives me a steel container I can start to work with. Let's take a peek over on the other side, see if there's any other resources anywhere in this area. And you always kind of get lucky sometimes. What do we got here? McDonald's cup. Yeah, I don't really need that. Some sort of phone has been destroyed. Let's just see. That doesn't look recoverable. Somebody left a nasty pillow. I don't know if I'd need that at this point in time, but might just keep this case for a little flat surface. I don't know exactly what I'd use it for, but we'll keep that. No, there's a beer can. It's been shot up. That's right. We got here a little container. And looks a little bit too warm. Either way, alright, well, got a little flat surface if I need it to cut on or something, and a cup at this point. Give that a good scrub out. Potentially got a couple containers now. That's enough to start. Alright, so now that I found a couple things, that little backpack bag I got, I'm just going to pull that out and start to utilize it. I don't want to be seen carrying around big piles of stuff. It's always better to have things concealed so people don't know what you're carrying. But for the steel cup, another cup, these all have to be cleaned out, obviously. Little flat surface I potentially could use as a mini cutting board, if you will. Normally, if I was in a more desperate situation, I would take that pillow. I would see that as a resource for the cloth and the material alone if I wanted to make it into a char, even if I didn't want to use it as a pillow. But for this specific situation, I'm just going to leave that be. Kind of wander around a little further and see. See, people are just kind of getting going in the day here. It's Saturday, so no. Let's do a little peek and see if we can find any other resources. Little kids container looks a little too small to be of any real use. Oh, hey, what do we have here? Hold on, let's get in there. Oh, there's a good score. 2-liter pop bottle. We have a way to hold water. That's a critical bit. Oh, I see another something in here. Oh, what is this? Some sort of bent tent peg. Anything else? Oh. Some sort of ball. I don't know what use I'll have for that, but well, that's a good score. Either way. I have to wash out this container, but I've got a container that can hold a day's worth of water. That's always good. Saves half the battle right there. Don't know exactly what I'll do with this tent peg, but see if I can straighten it out. It'll serve purpose either way. Taking little bits of metal like this is always handy. It's hard to come across that kind of stuff in nature, then you can't make it yourself. So I'll throw both of these things into the backpack. I don't think I'll need this ball. I don't think it's going to help me any. But either way, I'll take these two. Good scores. Move on. So like I say, either way, I feel like I've been pretty lucky so far this morning. Managed to find myself a little container to cook in and a container to store water in. So gathering up containers is always a good thing to do. I could use definitely a bigger pot, but it's a good start. Like I say, just got the little backpack, little cheapie I threw on my back here. So, but I see over in that area, swing the camera around, there's a kids park here. You know, obviously nobody here at this point in time, but I see a bunch of kids toys sitting over in the sandbox over there. So I'm going to go explore that and see if there's any, good containers worth having in that environment, or if there's anything that, a family might have left behind or something, right? Either way, like I say, it's all about gathering resources. You want to start to gather together the things that are going to increase your comfort level in any type of survival situation, whether it be an urban or rural survival. You're out in the woods, you're going to need basic things. You need some way to keep the rain off of you. You need some way to be able to tie things together and have cordage to, whip things off. You always need a knife, that's a given. You need a good way to make a fire. You just need these basic elements of things. A good steel container is always good to cook in. I mean, there's other ways to go about it, but steel is king when it comes to convenience and ease of access when you're in the urban environments. But just take a peek around this little sandbox area. I know it's weird, you're kind of looking at kids' toys and that type of thing. And then potentially, if I was more desperate, that would be a half-decent container, except it's got a hole in it. So I don't seem to see too many other things at this park, though. It seems fairly limited in that regard. Not too many left behinds. A few things left over here, but Looks like just some McDonald's bags and stuff. Nothing worth having. It's all soaking wet. If it was dry, I'd take it as tender, but given that it's not. When it comes to these types of environments, quite often you'll find all sorts of little things that you wouldn't even imagine why they'd be here. But kids and families, they bring things and they leave things and they do things that go beyond the imagination. But either way, we'll just take a peek over at this garbage can here, see if there's any containers or anything. Don't really want to be doing too much dumpster diving. I'm not really at that point of that. Yeah, well, doesn't look like there's too much to offer in that point. That's okay though. I normally try to stay away from just digging stuff out of garbages. I mean, I will if I have to when it comes to a desperate situation, but I'm more interested at this point in time of these oak trees that are in the area. The time of year we're in, they should have been dropping acorns. So maybe I'll try to harvest together a little handful of acorns and see if I can get something for a meal later on. Give me a bit of proteins and fats, that kind of thing. We will be doing a lot of food gathering as I move through time, but I'll just take a peek at this tree as I move out of this area. As I can see, we've kind of taken a peek around the park. There wasn't a huge amount. I mean, we did grab those containers, is always a bonus. I'd like to find some sort of cover if I could. It's always a gain to have. I do have that emergency mylar one sitting in my little pocket there, but let's see here. Yeah, that's what I'm talking. Acorns. There's lots of them around here. So maybe I'll cut and gather up a handful of these. They could give me some proteins and fats later. I just got to cook them out to leach out the tannins, but I'll take a handful of these. Maybe I'll grab a little bit more. I'll cut the camera here and we'll cut back a little later. Okay, so I managed to gather up probably a pound or two of acorns from this tree in a matter of minutes. As I was walking, I thought I'd just kind of point out so this is a little plantain, and these are edible plants. And normally I would harvest those if I was out in a natural environment, but given that we're in a field like this, 10 to 1 there's going to be a lot of sprays and pesticides, whatever. So even though you might see multiple edible plants like these little plantains here could easily help add to be a meal, I don't think I'll harvest from here because it looks like too well groomed of an area, and I'd be concerned about toxins potentially within pesticides and that type of thing getting into my food. So even if you see them, it doesn't mean they're always good scores. Like I say, there's lots of plantain that are popping up all over this area, but I'll tend to stay away from these and see if I can find better resources elsewhere. So here's another prime example. I'm only a few feet further. I just came across this little button mushroom. If this was out in a wilderness environment, I'd probably harvest this. Now I'd do some definite inspecting of it to make sure it was more edible than poisonous, if you will. But from everything I'm seeing here, this looks like it's one of the edible mushrooms. But either way, I still, even though that's a nice little handful of food, I still wouldn't harvest this just because of the location that I'm pulling it from. So one of the things I've stumbled upon here is a pear tree. So I see some pears have fallen from the tree just sitting on the ground. They look like, some of them look like they're in a pretty rough state, but I'll see if this pear tree has any still on it. Potentially I'll grab a few of those if I could. There's nothing like having some sugars into the mix, but I see one there. I'll try to harvest that potentially and see if there's any other pears that I could reach. But yeah, this seems like a good little score. I know it's a little late in the year when it comes to grabbing pears in my location. Yeah, there's a couple more further up into the tree. I don't know if a camera is picking it up with justice, but I'm going to see if I can harvest a couple of these and see what I can do. So I still haven't fully left the park area yet. I've been finding pretty good resources in the zone, so I just kind of been gathering as I go. I did pick up probably 4 or 5 different pears there that all look like they were in really good state. I might have to cut a piece or two out, but either way they're all going to be cooked off. So I don't trust eating anything when I'm out in the field without it being cooked. So, and I can see there's another Powerade bottle potentially sitting on the other side of this fence I might just grab, because having containers is always good. Let's grab that. Perfect. One man's garbage is another man's treasure kind of thing, right? But either way, I see these wood resources that are here. and there seems to be some rubber hosing. If I was doing a longer term survival, I'd grab that rubber hose, and I'd definitely set these aside to be in a dry area to harvest. Wood in the city can be sometimes difficult to come by, and this looks like half decent amount, enough to kind of cook off a few meals, if you will. But the primary focus at this point in time is really just getting my water supply together. So one of the fantastic things about parks like these is now they have bathrooms. So I can get tappable water here, potable water, if you will. I'll definitely have to clean out the containers, but either way, I've got a sink to work with. So it's a good start. I'm gonna, looks like somebody has thrown a few things away in here. A little pouch. I don't know what's in there. A few things in this pouch I'll take a peek at. And take the pouch, I guess. Glove, a little fancy feast, cat food can. That might serve purpose as well. So I'll take that. Take this little container. Looks like it's got a few things that I might be able to use, or maybe not. We'll see. Either way, I'll just take the container. I'll toss that stuff. Sink filler. Yeah, that'll do. So, alright, container fancy feast stuff. Like I say, I'm going to clean up these containers, at least the water one. I need to get water supply happening. I'm already getting thirsty, so. Okay, so thoroughly cleaned out my containers. Managed to get 2 liter of potable water, and the Powerade container full of water. So my water supply has been dealt with for the day. But given that I've in this public washroom, I found this little kit. My thinking really is there was a little pen sitting in the garbage. So I grabbed that, used it as a kind of roll, if you will, and now I'm just liberating some toilet paper. So I know it's not the most exciting thing to watch, but I figured might as well take some paper while I'm here. But I gotta be quick because it's starting to get busy in this area. Alright, well, I think it's almost time to leave the park. The morning's starting to get on now. Definitely more traffic starting to come in. Like I say, started off with an empty bag and it's already getting half full. It's good to see we've got the food and water under control. Grab some toiletries just to make sure. That's always good to have for tinder and those types of things. When you're in urban environments, coming across free wood is sometimes difficult, given that there's only a limited amount of trees and they're normally groomed. So, like I say, when it came to the wood that was sitting over in the location in behind me there, I don't know if the camera's getting it, but I might come back and harvest that later on. And then once it dries out a bit and the eager early morning people are done at the park. But I think I'm gonna kind of move on to other locations at this point. Still want to harvest more food. You got to get up to 2,000 calories a day, so it's you got to get out there and start doing it, right? So I don't know if I was in more desperate situations. Somebody's planted a whole pile of tomato. I don't know if the camera gets it good, but there's definitely tomato there for days. I'd come and harvest that if I was desperate enough, but that's not the intent today. But looks like there's a handful of nice ones. All sorts of little wild edibles as you move along. Right now I'm just looking for some cordage material that I can make some quick rope with. Well, this dumpster seems to be full of a pile of cardboard, so if I needed to make some bedding material later on, I know where I can come back to. Fair enough. That might be my bedding for later, we'll see. Okay, well, I'm coming up to a major intersection within the city, but this is the type of plant I'm looking for. I think a large yucca plant. So I'm going to harvest a few of these leaves and try to cut them in as close to the base as I can, and this will become some cordage for me later on. So I'll take 2 or 3 of these now, and then we'll move on and get out of the kind of heavy core urban environment and push more in towards neighborhoods and that kind of stuff. So let me harvest this and then I'll get back to you. Oh, here we go. I find schools to be a half decent area. It's one of the paper balled ones. It's not metal. Damn it. What do we got here? stop here for a minute and take a break either way. It's unfortunate. I was hoping that that was one of the metal bodied ones. But it's shiny cardboard, no good for nothing. Alright, well, might as well just do a little recap of kind of where I've gotten to so far. So, like I say, I harvested a couple of these yucca leaves, type of thing. I'm gonna split those as such and kind of bang them out a bit, turn them into some improv cordage, so I've got a bit of rope. And I'll kind of do that once I actually stop in a location. I really just stopped here for a minute just to take a breather. Been walking all over, so I'm in yet another school field. But needless to say, things have been going along pretty well. I've got some toiletries in this little bag that we managed to score. Got the 2 liter pop. Got the other little drinking container. Got a water cup. Cup to boil food in, or cook food in. A little flat surface that I could potentially cut things on if I needed to. And this little tent bag. This is the acorns that I managed to harvest. Like I said, there was piles of them there, but I just harvested enough to make a meal, if you will. And here's the pears. There's definitely, I think I got 4 good pears in there. So there's definitely enough within those to constitute being something of a meal. I do plan on harvesting more food, but as it goes for the first like 3 or 4 hours of the day kind of thing, seems to be going along pretty well. Alright, so we're back off on the road again. One of the things I wanted to kind of mention when you're doing urban survival, homeless type stuff, you always want to have that kind of gray man mentality. Try to blend in, try not to stand out, try not to draw attention to yourself. Really, your primary objective is going to be getting food, water, shelter, fire, the basic things you need to survive. The more you draw attention to yourself, the more difficult that can be sometimes. So, as you're kind of moving through these environments, just try to be low-key, try not to draw notice. If you see that potentially there's a situation where you would draw notice to yourself, try to avoid those as much as you can. Your objective is to really kind of get the job done, if you will. So I just wanted to kind of throw out that side note about, be the gray man. It makes things much easier that way. Always one of the joys to find in any type of situation. Blackberry bushes. We're getting close to the end of September here, and you can see there's still clusters of them that are red. So whether you're in an urban environment or a rural environment, out in the woods or in the big city kind of thing, either way, blackberries are always a good find. So I'm gonna see if I can liberate a few handfuls of these and just have them as a snack, and then I'll move on. Now another score sitting by a bus stop. So got a bunch of rose hips, just a nice little cluster of them. So these are fantastic. They're high in calorie, high in vitamin C, high in vitamin A. 3 of these that size has the equivalent of the vitamin C that's within a large orange. So to give you an idea how healthy these little things are, you gotta pop them off at the base, split them open in half. Inside, I'll just see if I can get this on camera. Inside these, there's these seeds. Gotta get those seeds out. Don't want those in the equation. They got fur on them, and if you swallow them, they can irritate your throat and stuff. So you want to get that out. That right there is the edible part. Quite tasty. It's almost got like a fruit flavor. So, quite good. I'm going to harvest a bunch of these because they're here and it's worth it. So I had the privilege earlier of having access to that city park where I was able to acquire water and that kind of thing. But if you don't have that kind of luxury, you're going to have to find yourself local water sources. This is one of the few creeks that exist within my area. If I had to, I'd harvest the water from here. That was my original plan, and then I just ended up over by the park. So my original plan was to come here, harvest the water, filter it off, boil it off, that type of thing. But as you can see, it's not really the cleanest creek in the world, but when it comes to urban environments, you should be fully aware of where your water supplies are. I mean, that should be a given within any environment. If you're in any type of survival situation, be very cognizant of exactly where your water sources are, and if you know that you're going to be a distance from them for a period of time, try to stock up whenever you can. Water is a critical thing. You know, you need 2 liters a day, they say, but I find when you're out in survival situations, or you know, you're any type of 24-hour challenges, or however you want to look at it, you're going to burn through a lot more than 2 liters of water a day. And as soon as you start doing work, and as soon as you start getting physically active and moving around, and you know, putting, you know, miles behind the feet in walking, you're going to burn through the water. So like I said, I was just fortunate enough that I was able to get potable water without having to process it myself. But when it comes to your situations, you know, if you're not close to potable water, definitely be aware of where there's water sources and be aware of how you process them. Normally I would have to filter this water because it is a little bit on the murky side, and I would have to boil it to make sure I got rid of any of the pathogens. That would be a standard practice I would do whether I was in the woods or whether I'm in a city. So I always find it's handy if you find little green areas that you can kind of rest in. Potentially there is wood supplies, you know, of some of the trees I've already passed had some kind of dead wood hanging on it that you could easily break and take. But these are great little areas where you can just kind of rest and be out of the mindful eye of people, and you know, take it easy for a few minutes, gather your thoughts about what your next course of action are. When it comes to any type of survival situation, it's always about calories out and calories in, and how well rested you are, how well hydrated you are, you know, those types of things. So you always be mindful and take those into account of, do I have enough calories to maintain the energy level in which I'm putting out, you know. Yeah, I turned around and ate a couple cups of blackberries earlier, but you know, that's good for a little tiny sugar rush, but it's definitely not enough for long-term sustainment. You've got to find calories. You've got to make that your mission. It's one of the most difficult things when you're in any type of survival situation, is ensuring that you get those 2,000-3,000 calories a day. Now, when I say 3,000, most people would say 2, but when you're out in the wilderness and you're doing stuff, you're going to burn through water, you're going to burn through calories far more than you would expect that you're going to. And unless you're very, very cognizant of the fact of how much energy you're burning, you're going to burn through lots of it. So try to take your time, be at ease. Don't feel like, you know, you're overwhelmed because all of a sudden you're into this kind of situation. You just have to assess what your needs are and how you're going to meet them as efficiently as possible. So I came across this hawthorn. It's just teeming with berries. Normally they say, trees with red berries, you stay away from that kind of thing. Hawthorn's one of the exceptions to the rule. So you can tell it's hawthorn by the shape of the leaves. They've got an unusual shape to them. And if you taste the leaves, they have a bit of an appley taste to them. The leaves are fully edible. I actually think they're the preferred part of the plant. As it lives up to its name, it's got these wicked thorns that exist on them, and they're quite sharp, you know. You got to be careful and mindful of how you go about approaching these. You don't want to get yourself tetanus or anything like that. And those spiky elements will be quick to do those types of things. So when it comes to the actual berries themselves, they are edible. They have a large, let me just try to do this on the camera. They have a large stone or seed that exists in the center of them, just a single. And that really you just get rid of. The flesh is the edible bit. Like I say, I actually prefer the leaves over the berries. Berries I find to be fairly bland. They don't really have a strong flavor to them. But as you can see, this bush is just teeming with them. You could easily harvest yourself enough to be a meal within these types of things. Yeah, it's a bit of work to process. The leaves are definitely easier, but hawthorn is a top tier survival plant in my perspective, just because we're late in the season. We're now into the fall now, and as you can see, there's ample production going on within this hawthorn tree, and leaves are like I say, to me, the better part of it. I actually prefer them by far. So I'll gather up a bunch of these leaves and a couple of the berries, and they'll be part of the stew pot for later. Chicory is a fantastic plant. It's one of the best survival plants you can come across when you're out, whether it be urban or rural. Every part of this plant is edible. It's a hardy plant. The root, if you extract the root out of the ground, you can roast it and turn it into a coffee substitute. Absolutely top shelf when it comes to survival foods. And I'm not going to harvest this entire plant, but I will take some pieces of it. So, and of course, we've got our classic dandelion. I'll harvest a few of the heads, maybe take a bit of leaf, but a lot of the leaf looks shoddy. Found another fruit-bearing tree, apple tree, putting them out. Late in the season, I'm surprised there's still apples on the tree, but there's some monster apples up there. I don't know if I can get my hands on 2 or 3 of those to definitely help the cause. I'd say it doesn't seem to be a shortage of food, really. Alright, well, this is only a small sampling, but this is a fantastic plant when it comes to harvesting for edibles. This is fennel. It has a very licoricey taste. So, the tastes almost identical to black licorice. I like harvesting the greens, but some people are more partial to the stalks and use them in soups to just kind of throw in to add flavor. But I'll just harvest a few of these. That'll give me a little bit of a licorice hint to the meal that I'm about to make. I noticed too there's some thistle over here. And if I get motivated, I might just harvest the root off of that. The top half of the plant is spiky and you don't want to touch it too much, but that's not the part you're after. If you can dig the root out, it's a substantial sized root, and it definitely adds some carbohydrates and starches to your meal. What do I spy with my little eye? Sweet. This is the kind of thing you're looking for. A stainless steel container that you could cook boiled water in. That is an A1 score. We'll take that. A keen eye that was sitting in the corner like that. It's always weird people leave things like that lying around all the time. But I guess there's so much of it everywhere. It just kind of is. But either way, I'll see it as a good gain. I'll take it. See, when I'm out doing bushcraft videos, I always do these little scenic shots, but this is what you get as scenic when it comes to urban environments. I don't know what to say to it. Not quite as joy-filled. But either way, I normally give 20-30 seconds of just bucking to the hood. Came out and I found this bench in the park that I could stop and kind of regroup. After finding the steel container, it was kind of a game changer to me. So now I'm going to get rid of these plastic containers, that kind of garbage that I had from earlier, just desperate to have any type of container. I'll keep the water bottles, but now I've got 2 steel containers that I can boil water in. That's a real game changer. That steps things up. It gives you a solid container, which is one of the 5 C's. You've got redundancy within containers, which is great for survivability. Having the ability to hold and take along large amounts of water for my trip is fantastic as well. I'm glad to see that that's kind of come. I would have liked to see that nest inside the other, but fate and circumstance. Either way, I've gathered up a half decent amount of food. When it comes to the things I've gathered, got more food in here. They got acorns and pears and apples and other greeneries, chicory and dandelion, and there's lots of stuff in there. There'll be a lot in the pot today. The rose hips and those types of things. So either way, it's a substantial amount of food that I've gathered up here. It'll be a little bit awkward to have to do off the acorns first and boil them for 20 minutes, drain the water off, and then reboil them with the food. But you do what you do, right? I want the proteins and fats that are in that meal. But as you can see, starting off with an empty bag first thing this morning and just a pocket knife in my hand, I've already stepped up to a good container system. I've got a cutting tool that sits on my hip. I've got combustion that sits on my hip as well, plus I have a lighter in my pocket. I'm missing the cover element, and I have the ability to make cordage and reproduce it. Even though I've got some cordage that I brought with me, I've got now localized resources that give me the ability to make cordage as well. Yucca is fantastic at making cords, even if you just use it without doing all the wrappings. Even if you just use it as a simple basic lash because you only need it for a day or so. Yucca is a great plant for that. So I'm going to carry on in my video. I just stopped, like I say, a bit of sunshine, wanted to kind of take a break and relook at everything that I have and what I need as I move forward. You know, I always want to have steel containers, I want to have cutting tools, I want to have cordage, I want to have cover, and I want to have some way of doing combustion. Those 5 things are critical elements. You must be doing them every single day. So the more I can strengthen this, you know, improv kit to be that, the easier survivability would be the next day. So when it comes to, you know, urban survival scenarios, as you can see, the food doesn't seem to be really that big of a deal. I mean, we're in you know, late September now, then I'm able to gather these resources readily. I could have gathered 10 times these and just didn't because you know, you want to balance what you take from the land, right? But as every day goes on in the survival scenario and you strengthen up your 5 C's and you get those to a comfortable level where they're producing, you know, the stability for you in your days, you move on to other things. But and it makes the next day that much easier. The main thing really is ensuring that you're gathering in the calories that you're going through in a day. You don't want to slowly burn yourself out over the days. You must make food one of the biggest priorities in any type of survival scenario. Yeah, there's guys out there, they'll starve it out for 3 or 4 days. They lose a lot of calories and a lot of energy. You have to make it your primary focus to try to find 2,000 calories a day every day if you're going to sustain yourself over time, which is a very difficult thing because you're burning calories as you're hunting for food. You know, like I said, in this scenario, I believe I've probably gathered up 1,000, 1,200 calories at least here, if not more. This could potentially turn into 2 meals for me easily, and I could easily gather more as the day went on. But you know, you're doing YouTube videos, you just want to kind of give a showing, a tutorial, if you will. So and along the way I found 3 stones, so I'll use them for part of my cooking. So and this is one of the holy grails, if you will, of urban survival. When you find a community garden, this garden has enough food for days, with different food ripening at different seasons. So I'm just at one of the local high schools bleachers, and I thought this might be a half decent place to cook lunch. So I just want to start processing down some of these acorns. So the thinking really is just crack open the shell with a rock. Now I want to pick out the fleshy innards that are inside here. And I don't necessarily want them to stay all together in one piece, because the more they break down, the more the tannins are released. But as you can see, from 2 seconds, there's half of a single acorn. That's a not bad little chunk of protein and fat. So we'll do that to a bunch of them and kind of break it down into little pieces so that they can be boiled off and get the tannins out of them to begin with. I haven't even gone through all the acorns, and I filled this can about what's that, 2/3 of the way up or so, and I've just added a bit of water and I'm just leaching the tannins out before I even look at doing a bit of a boil. But I didn't bother doing an entire full can. I thought that might be overkill given that I have the other vegetables, and this is going to be my protein and fat addition to those. So I could have carried on processing these down, potentially even made a second, third meal out of them, but didn't think it was necessary at this point. Got the fuel tabs going. I'll just use those 3 stones I gathered earlier. Just use those to kind of lift the can up a little bit, and and I'll get the fuel tab in underneath it. So as far as I understand it to be, I should be able to bring this to a boil and have it be at a boil for quite a few minutes. So I'm just kind of going to camp out here now and see if I can get some of these tannins out of these acorns. Well, the unfortunate reality is I found these fuel tabs that I have are just absolute garbage. Didn't bring the water up to a boil. Made it warm, but so it's going to be a lot more work getting the tannins out of there, and I'm a little bit concerned in that regard. I think I'm going to eat some of the apple and pear I got earlier, though. I've got to get some food into me, but I'm going to have to figure out an alternative to this whole getting a fire thing going. If that didn't work out the way I wanted it to in the least, so the tab lasted about 7 or 8 minutes and didn't burn nearly as hot enough to even bring that to a boil. So either way, we're going to have to adjust the plans now and kind of move forward, but one way or the other, it's just get on with it, I guess. One of the apples that I managed to score. It's not the hugest thing in the world, but either way, I'll get this into me at least, and just wait for those rocks to cool down. I'll have to kind of pack up, move to a different location. It's getting busy in this one again, so it's yeah, it's one of those things. I'm definitely going to have to do a quick ponder here of how I'm going to move forward with this whole getting this acorns cooked off. I think I'm going to have to go with paper and wood one way or the other. Back to being mobile again. Like I say, definitely a setback not being able to use those fuel tabs to do the boil off of the water. They're fairly big disappointment, really. But that's okay. Either way, time to move on to other locations. You can see it's just time to start to look for some wood and get a small fire going. Even though you're not supposed to in the cities, it's, you know, you gotta cook, right? So I gotta find a quiet place to cook, and then I gotta find bedding and shelter. Starting to get these things lined up. Just harvested a couple of tomatoes that they got growing out here. The Camino garden, like I said. I'm not going to rely on this thing too much. I could easily just grab all the food I needed here, but I do want to kind of push onward and try to figure out how to get a little wood fire going so I can get my dinner happening here. See, now there's tarp there, there's cover. I've seen them all over. You know, obviously I'm not going to go and start stealing something off somebody, but when it comes to in-urban environments, trying to find things like cover and cordage and those types of things, you know, if I wasn't the upstanding citizen that I am, I would have already acquired these types of things. But you know, just be mindful, and this is more to be a tutorial than anything else, if those resources are available if need be, right? You know, it's obviously you don't want to turn around and liberate anything unnecessarily, so I won't. But I just wanted to kind of put it in people's minds of, you know, if you're in a if it hits the shan kind of scenario, and you know, you need things to kind of get by, you take what you need. You know, unfortunately that's just how it is. But with the shelter concept that I'm thinking of for later on for me, I think it's going to be very elementary, very rudimentary. There's not really much to it, so I don't think I'll need a cover. Alright, well, I've decided to head back to the park I started at earlier today. I think what I'm going to do is, you know, the can that I'm using that has the acorns in it, I think I'm going to end up making modifications with my knife to that can to turn it into like a little stove. And I just picked up a bit of wood on the way, a little bit of paper. I'll have to kind of put those in a spot and go grab more. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to cook off my dinner until the sun goes down, where there's less eyes able to easily see things. But either way, I've got an agenda worked out for exactly what I'm going to be doing now. So I'm heading back to the park that I was at. It's a couple kilometers away from, you know, where I've traveled a fair bit over the day. So you know, when I get back to the park, I'll look at making this stove and seeing if those wood resources are still there. If they are, all the better. I'll start to process some of those down and prepare them for later on, so that when the sun does go down, I'm fully ready to just make a fire and cook my dinner. Okay, well, this is the location we were in earlier today. I'm back out by the bathrooms and that kind of thing. I've already restocked my water and given the acorns a few flushes of water off. Might as well do that while I'm in this location. So but off of the wood that was sitting here. I'm not taking it all, but I did kind of get a little pile, enough to probably do a cook-off for a few minutes. So I'll take this wood as a resource and bring it over to where I want to kind of make my base camp for later on, and we'll start to kind of gather resources into that location, and that way I'm prepared for later. Okay, so we're back to the location where I found the steel can earlier today. I think that this might actually be a half decent place to hole up overnight. I know that this area stays dry, especially underneath this bench. So the wood that I grabbed from down by the washrooms, just kind of broke and processed and set some of that in there. Hopefully that's enough to get a boil off later on. Like I said, I do plan on turning the can into a stove. That part of the process, but either way, I'm just going to leave the wood here at this point in time. I'd have to gather up some cardboard like we saw earlier today when I was out scouting around, a few other things, but there's a lot of people in this area right now, so I'm not in a big rush for this. Looks like the half decent amount of cardboard, and use that for some bedding. So I got back to the location. Looks like the wood's still here and the acorns are still in the container and that over there. Like I say, grab some cardboard just to use to give some insulation to get up off the ground. The breeze is definitely picked up in this location, but I don't know, what can you do at this point in time? But this shelter setup helps me avoid not having any cover because it's a solid roof, and that it allows for that to be. But you know, it's not an ideal situation, but at the same point in time, you're dealing with urban survival / homeless, survival. It's not always ideal. But I think when it came to the food scores and that today, things have gone really well. I'm going to probably start to put the food into the container and get that ready, start to process it. There's lots of people around, so I just want to be kind of subtle to what I'm doing. But and I know my camera battery life is already starting to get pretty shoddy, so I won't keep with really long scenes, but hopefully I'll be able to kind of finish this entire video. Acorns hitting the roof. Alright, well, so I ended up with about, I don't know if you can see that very well, but ended up with about a third to half a pot of greens. Everything from dandelion, chicory, there's fennel, there's all sorts of stuff into it, just anything you can imagine. Then I've got these pears. They were a pretty good score. I think that'll give some volume to the meal. A couple tomatoes. Then, of course, our little culprits of the day. Soaking our acorns. So the thinking really is the acorns will have to be cooked off for 20 minutes in boiling water, drain the water off them, bring up all the greens to a boil, and add the acorns to them, let them cook for another 20 minutes or so. Right before everything's kind of finished in that regard, chop up these tomatoes and throw them in there so they just get a light blanching almost, if you will. And the pears are just there to give me a sugar boost. So all in all, I think that's a half decent score for food for the day, if you will. So yeah, one thing I did forget that I even gathered earlier was the rose hips. That one doesn't look too good, but that's alright. These are really quite a tasty version of rose hips. I've had many different types of rose hips. Some of them are sweet, some of them aren't that sweet at all, and this is one of the sweeter ones. It tastes almost like fruit. It's really quite tasty. I could easily see making this into a jam if you added a bit of sugar. So it's unfortunate I didn't manage to get more yucca into the video. I was hoping to do more with the cordage in of things, but given that my cover was very skinny this time and just couldn't really find much to use as cover, that I could have used some garbage bags and stuff, but I'm not that desperate. And the location I've got now should give me enough cover to sleep through the night without it being an issue. So, but I'll just show you when it comes to the yucca, just as a lash. So I took those pieces of yucca I had harvested earlier and made them into about 1/8-inch strips, and you can see extremely strong. It takes a massive amount of energy to break those. I mean, and that's just for basic lashing, and I haven't even turned it into rope or anything else to strengthen it. So, I was planning on making some cordage out of this yucca and that kind of thing, but with nothing to have to tie down and tie off or any of that business like I would a tarp out in the field, it really just seems unnecessary at this point in time. I do think it's a terrible shame that I harvested 3 pieces of the yucca plant and didn't use it. I hate doing that, but if you're going to harvest something, you should utilize the resource, and I might just take it home and turn it into some cordage just out of principle, but either way, as you can see, yucca is definitely a quick lashing that you can use in an urban environment. You'll find this plant all over the place. Okay, so I committed. I've got to get my wood stove ready, and so I had to take my acorns out and just let them dry and sit there for a bit while I form this can into the stove to get ready to cook things. So, but you can see, put the can there for kind of context reference of my hand even. I'll give you an idea how much food that really is, and that's high calorie food there. So I'll add that into the stew and definitely boost the meal up. Might not be the tastiest thing in the world, but acorns aren't too bad. So you can see I don't get complicated with my stoves. I just cut a square out of the side of the can, bend it inwards so it has a bit of a slope. It lifts the wood up a bit and gives it a bit of air underneath the pile. I'll end up poking a bunch of holes into the top of it and then just feed the wood in through here. Okay, and 2 more minutes has passed, and as you can see, that's the stove. Put a bunch of holes into the top to let the flames come through along the bottom. Added in some additional air holes. Nothing fancy, just enough to make it work. Like I say, put your wood in through the slot, flames come out the top, set your pot on top of that, you're off to the races. Not used to doing videos in urban environments. It's a little bit different, working with different types of things, but it's very cool. I could see having fun doing these types of things. Might do another one of these types of videos into the future, we'll see. Like I say, I know it's unfortunate that I'm not showing the cooking of the slop on video. I just know what the city's like. I know how restricted they are, blah blah blah. So I'll do what I need to do to survive, but that's all I need to say about that. So, as you can see, this is very elementary. I'm still fairly exposed. It's not like you got a fireplace or anything else. I potentially would roll over on my other side and just tuck into the wall, and then put my toque and gloves on, and just roll into a ball into the wall and just call it a night. So I'm almost 100% certain you're not going to catch any of this on the camera, but that's okay. I figured I'd give a little slop review, if you will, if you can see that at all. I'm holding the can up. So out of the things that I threw in there today, cooked off, I would say that the only regret I had for throwing in the pot would be the chicory. I think that really, any of that stem at all of the chicory in any way should only be baked and used as a coffee substitute. It just gets too cellulose. They say you can eat all parts of the plant, but good luck with that. It's I let it cook as far as I could and kind of burn through whatever I needed to burn through, and still found that the hardness of the chicory just wouldn't soften off like everything else. The acorns, after washing them 5 or 10 times, and then I did a double change of water on the acorns. I ended up switching everything around and cooking the acorns off first and double watered it, and it was a whole little process that went on there. But needless to say, the acorns turned out okay. They started to mild right off fairly quickly after about 20 minutes of a boil or so, and maybe half an hour. That they added to the meal for sure. When it came to the tomato, I made the mistake of just kind of cutting it up and throwing it in at the end, but it just softened off too much. I think the flavors would have been better. I thought it was going to add to the flavor of the pot of stew, if you will, but it didn't really, and it's would have been better off to just eat that straight off as it was. But like I say, the chicory, this is a lesson learned. I don't mind the dandelion style leaves of the chicory thrown in, or maybe the flowers, but any part of the stem or whatever needs to be roasted and just treated as a coffee substitute. I wouldn't want to use it for anything else, really. But yeah, that kind of gives you my 2 cents. I wouldn't say it was the best food in the world. It's not meant to be. When you're dealing with urban survival situations, you're really primarily wanting to get calories into your body. As it goes for a meal, I wouldn't say it's the worst survival meal I've ever eaten, because I've had some nasty things my days, but it's also wasn't the best either. The one good part about it was, given the diversity of the plants that went into the making of it, the nutrition level within that mix was very, very high. So you kind of choke it down knowing that it's good for you, not necessarily that it tastes like McDonald's, right? But like I say, thanks for tuning in. I'll probably be doing a more bushcraft oriented one the next time I do one, but this was kind of fun. It was something different. I'm not used to just kind of walking about in a city and being like, all right, well, how am I going to pull this off, kind of thing. So stuff you kind of think about, but you don't normally get out and do. But I thought it was really fun. Hopefully I'll get out and do this again. Potato slop. Get the rose hips out, eat them as a treat after. They're so tasty, I didn't want to mix them in. But the actual meal turned in, nutritionally good. Good morning. You always gotta be up early. The old ladies like to walk their dogs super early in the morning. I think you can see her over there. She had to come early. That's alright though. It's part of the deal that you go through. Well, welcome to my world. It must be 6:30, 6:30, 7 o'clock, somewhere around there. But I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's already multiple footprints of people that have swung by where I've been. So it definitely wasn't the quietest place in the world. But either way, we're here now to start another day, right? And of course, you definitely don't want to start the day on an empty stomach, so a couple pears will help get the day started. It's really it's a humbling experience coming out and doing things like this. It's you get to see how the people live. Well, I've been there before, but you get to see how people live that are in unfortunate situations. It's easy enough for people to walk by and judge the homeless person and that type of thing, but you never have any idea what's going on in their lives. I recommend to anybody to get out and try to do this at least once in their life. Maybe 2 or 3 times, and really see how difficult it is for people to live like this. It's like I said, it's really easy to judge the homeless, but you come out and spend a couple days like this and see how they live, and I think you'd have a whole different perspective on how these people are, who these people are and how they're living. It's a very humbling experience. When I was younger, I spent years of my life living out in the woods, and I feel like as you get older, you kind of lose touch with what it is to connect with people like that. To me, it was important to get out and do this type of thing. It was important to feel like, I humble yourself. So when it comes to interacting with these people, that are out there in the world, you take a humble, gentle approach. It's the right thing to do. So like I said, anybody that's even thinking about doing something like this, go and do it. It'll make you a better person. It's good for you. People might laugh, they might think whatever they want to think. But for your soul and your spiritual development, it's a good thing to do. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching. Cheers.